Ethan Hale had attended hundreds of high-profile events in his life, but nothing had prepared him for the moment he found her on a cold Seattle morning, a moment that would lead him straight into his ex-fiancee's wedding with a stranger on his arm. Seattle's Capitol Hill district was just waking up when Ethan Hale, a 35-year-old tech millionaire, stepped out of his Tesla. The rain had stopped an hour ago, but the streets still glistened under the warm neon reflections of early cafes opening for the day. He wasn't supposed to be here. He normally lived in a penthouse overlooking Lake Union, far from the buzz and grit of this artsy neighborhood. But after receiving the wedding invitation from his ex-fiancée, Charlotte Whitmore, the woman who left him without a goodbye, sleep became impossible. He needed coffee, air, anything to think straight, and that's when he saw her. A young woman sat on the sidewalk, curled up against the brick wall of a closed bookstore. Her brown hair hung in messy waves, partially hiding her face. Her clothes were layered but thin, mismatched, and soaked from last night's rain. A faded backpack rested beside her, held together by safety pins and pure hope. At first, Ethan assumed she was asleep. But when he walked past, he heard a soft, pained whisper. "Please, not today," he stopped. Against every instinct of distance his wealthy lifestyle had built around him, Ethan lowered himself to her level. "Hey, are you all right?" His voice was gentle, careful. The woman flinched and looked up. Her eyes, a warm, startling hazel, widened in fear before softening. "I'm fine," she muttered. "Just bad morning. Bad month." She tried to straighten her jacket. "Bad year, really." Ethan didn't smile, but something in him cracked open. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated.
Mia.
"Mia," he repeated, like he was trying to anchor her existence in the noisy city around them. "Have you eaten?" A sharp shake of her head, that was all he needed. "Come on. There's a diner around the corner." She stiffened. "Why would you bother? People don't usually notice me." Ethan swallowed, the guilt rising in his chest. The truth was, he used to be one of those people. He used to walk past suffering without thinking, but today wasn't one of those days. "Because you look like someone who deserves a warm meal," he said simply. Mia studied him with guarded suspicion, then slowly nodded. They walked toward the diner, the early morning wind brushing past them as the city stirred around them. Ethan still didn't know why he felt drawn to help her, or why the timing felt so strange, but inside that diner, over a cup of hot black coffee and a plate of scrambled eggs, Mia would reveal something that would change everything, including how Ethan planned to face his ex-fiancée at her wedding, and the secret Mia was hiding was bigger than he ever imagined. Ethan thought he was just giving a hungry woman a warm meal. But the moment Mia began to speak, he realized she wasn't simply homeless. She was haunted by something she refused to say out loud. The diner on East Pike Street was half empty, humming with soft conversations and the clatter of dishes. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee filled the air. Mia sat across from Ethan, her fingers wrapped tightly around a steaming mug as if the warmth alone was keeping her alive. For several seconds, neither spoke. Ethan didn't want to rush her. He'd already learned that life on the streets stripped people of choices. At least here, he could offer her space. Mia finally broke the silence. "You don't look like you belong in this part of Seattle." Ethan smirked softly. "Is it that obvious?" "You're wearing a jacket that probably costs more than my entire backpack," she said, taking a sip of her coffee. "And your shoes are spotless. People around here don't have spotless shoes." He couldn't help the laugh that escaped him. "You're observant. Survival does that," she replied quietly. Ethan's smile faded. Something inside him grew heavier, a mix of sympathy and curiosity. "What happened, Mia?" he finally asked. How did you end up out here?" Her fingers tightened around the mug before she set it down. She looked out the window, watching raindrops gather on the glass as if the weather understood her pain. "It's complicated," she whispered. "I wasn't always like this. I had a job, an apartment, a fiancé." Ethan's chest tightened. "A fiancé?" Mia nodded but didn't look at him. "We were supposed to get married last spring. Small ceremony in Portland. My dress was simple but beautiful, and we planned to move to Florida after the wedding." Her lips quivered. But a month before the wedding, everything fell apart. Ethan leaned in slightly. Did he leave you? No, she swallowed hard. He died. The shock hit Ethan like cold water.
Mia.
I'm so sorry. She shook her head. It wasn't just losing him. After the funeral, I couldn't keep up with life. Lost my job. Bills piled up. I didn't have family to fall back on. Everything just collapsed. Her voice cracked on the last word. Ethan felt something shift in him, a quiet, protective instinct he hadn't felt in years. You didn't deserve that, he said softly. Maybe not, she whispered, eyes downcast. But here I am. Ethan wanted to say more, but she looked up suddenly, her expression changing, as if she had just remembered something urgent. What about you? She asked quickly. You look troubled too. Ethan hesitated. He hadn't planned to tell anyone about the wedding invitation sitting in his car, the one from the woman who shattered his heart 2 years ago. My ex-fiancé is getting married next week, he admitted. Mia blinked, confused. And you're going? I don't know, he said. But she invited me like it was some kind of power move.
Mia nodded slowly.
People like that usually want to prove they've won. Ethan stared at her. She understood more than he expected. Then Mia whispered something he didn't see coming. Do you want someone to go with you? Ethan stiffened. You mean you? Mia nodded once, and before Ethan could respond, the waitress interrupted, placing the check on the table, along with a small note scribbled in messy handwriting. He flipped it over, his blood ran cold. Be careful who you trust. The note wasn't from the waitress. It was already on the table when they sat down. Ethan didn't believe in coincidences, not when the warning note appeared before Mia even sat down. And not when her face went pale the second she read it. Ethan stared at the note again, his heartbeat thudding loud enough to drown out the diner chatter. Be careful who you trust. It felt like a threat, or a warning. But from who? He slid it across the table toward Mia. Did you see anyone near the booth before we sat down? He asked quietly. Mia didn't answer. Her eyes stayed glued to the note, her fingers trembling slightly, a reaction she clearly tried to hide. Mia? Ethan pressed. She blinked, shaking herself back to reality. Sorry, I just know. I didn't see anyone. But her voice was tight, uncertain. Maybe it's nothing. But Ethan could tell it wasn't nothing. He was used to reading people, investors, corporate sharks, executives who lied with a smile. Mia was different. Transparent in her expressions, honest in her pain. And right now, she looked terrified. The waitress came back to refill their coffees, completely unaware of the tension brewing at the table. Everything all right here? She asked politely. Ethan forced a smile. Yeah, thanks. Mia swallowed hard. Can I keep the note? Ethan hesitated but nodded. She folded it with shaky hands and slipped it into her jacket pocket. When the waitress left, Ethan leaned forward. Tell me the truth, he said gently. Does this message mean something to you? Mia opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes darted toward the window, scanning the street like she expected someone to appear. It's nothing, she whispered. Just too many bad memories. Ethan didn't push her. But he didn't believe her, either. The air between them turned heavy. Finally, Mia changed the subject. You said your ex-fiancé invited you to her wedding, she murmured. Why would she do that after whatever happened between you two? Ethan let out a long breath. Because Charlotte always needed to win. When she left me, she made it sound like she was trading up, like I wasn't enough. Now she's getting married to a guy who comes from an old money family in Connecticut. She wants me to see it, wants to prove I'm replaceable.
Mia frowned.
You're not. For some reason, her words hit deeper than they should have. It doesn't matter, Ethan replied. I wasn't planning to go anyway. He paused. But when you offered to come with me, she looked up, hopeful and nervous at the same time. Was that weird? I didn't mean, no, Ethan said quickly. It wasn't weird, just unexpected. Mia looked relieved, then thoughtful. Maybe having someone by your side would take away her power. People like your ex, they thrive on making others feel small. Ethan studied her carefully, struck by how accurately she understood Charlotte, despite never meeting her. You talk like you know someone like that, he said quietly. I do, she whispered. Ethan opened his mouth to ask who, but then Mia froze. staring past his shoulder. Her face went colorless. Mia? Ethan turned. A tall man in a gray hoodie stood outside the diner window. He wasn't looking at Ethan. He was staring directly at Mia, and when she saw him, she whispered only one word: run. Mia had been calm through every painful detail of her story, but the moment she saw the man in the gray hoodie, her entire body reacted like she'd just seen a ghost. For a split second, Ethan didn't understand what Mia meant. Run. From who? But the fear in her eyes was real, primal, shaking, undeniable. Before he could turn again, Mia grabbed his wrist. Ethan, I'm serious. We need to leave.
Now.
He didn't question her. Something in her voice, the urgency, the trembling, told him this wasn't paranoia. This was danger. Ethan tossed two 20s on the table and stood. Mia slid out of the booth fast, clutching her backpack to her chest. She stayed close behind him as they moved toward the exit on the opposite side of the diner, the one leading into a side alley. Who is he? Ethan whispered as they walked quickly. Mia didn't answer. Instead, she kept glancing over her shoulder, her breath coming out in frantic puffs. When they pushed through the back door into the alley, she didn't stop moving until they reached the sidewalk. Only then did Ethan grab her shoulders gently. Mia, look at me. Tell me what's going on. Her eyes were wide, glossy, and full of something deeper than fear. He followed me, she whispered hoarsely. Ethan stiffened. What do you mean, followed you? From where? From before. She shook her head like she couldn't get the words out. When I was living in Portland, after my fiancé died, I thought I finally got away. Ethan felt his gut twist. Is he dangerous? She didn't hesitate. Yes. That was all Ethan needed. He glanced toward the corner of the building, expecting the man to appear. People walked by on the busy street, bundled in jackets, hurrying to work or school. The everyday Seattle rhythm that made danger feel impossible, but Mia's panic didn't lie. Come on, Ethan said firmly. My car is this way. They started down the block, Ethan's stride quickening as he glanced behind them. For a few seconds, the man was nowhere in sight. Then Ethan saw him, gray hoodie, hands in pockets, walking swiftly, not toward them, but tracking them. Mia, Ethan said low, he's coming. She didn't turn to look. Her fingers just tightened around Ethan's sleeve. They reached the corner where Ethan had parked his Tesla. He fumbled with his keys, unlocking the car. The sound of footsteps behind them grew clearer. Hurry, Mia whispered. They both got inside. Ethan in the driver's seat, Mia in the passenger seat, slammed doors echoing like thunder in the narrow street. Ethan locked the doors. The man in the hoodie turned the corner. He stopped, and then, chillingly slow, he lifted his head. His eyes locked on Mia through the windshield. She collapsed back into her seat, shaking violently. Ethan, she whispered, voice breaking. That man, he's not just someone from my past. Ethan swallowed. Who is he, Mia? She shut her eyes. He's the reason my fiancé died. Ethan expected heartbreak, tragedy, maybe even guilt, but he never expected Mia to say the man in the gray hoodie was connected to her fiancé's death. For several seconds, Ethan couldn't speak. The car was silent except for the hum of the heater and Mia's shaky breathing. Outside, the man in the gray hoodie stood unnervingly still, watching them like he had all the time in the world. Mia, Ethan whispered, what do you mean he's the reason your fiancé died? Her hands clutched the edges of her jacket like she was holding herself together. My fiancé, Tyler, worked at a logistics company in Portland, she said, voice trembling. He discovered something he shouldn't have. They were smuggling prescription opioids out of the warehouse. Fake documents, fake shipments, all under the radar. Ethan's breath hitched. A drug ring.
Mia nodded.
Tears welled in her eyes. Tyler told me he needed to report it. I begged him to be careful, but he said if he stayed quiet, people could die. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, shaking harder as she spoke. One night, he didn't come home. I got a call from the police saying he'd crashed his car. They said it was an accident, but I knew it wasn't. Her voice cracked. His brakes had been tampered with. Ethan's jaw clenched in disbelief. And the man outside? He worked at the warehouse, Mia whispered. He threatened Tyler once when he refused to sign off on a shipment. A week after Tyler died, I saw him watching my apartment. When I moved to a shelter, he showed up nearby. When I relocated again, he was there too. Ethan stared at her, horrified. Why didn't you go to the police?
I tried, she said.
They saw a grieving fiancé with no proof. No evidence. Nothing to tie him directly to Tyler's accident, so they couldn't open an investigation. Her eyes filled with helplessness. They said I was imagining it. Ethan's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a homeless woman with bad luck. This was someone running from a nightmare. A shadow moved outside the windshield. The man took a single step forward. Mia gasped, shrinking into her seat. Ethan snapped into action. He started the Tesla, engine humming awake, and threw it into drive. The tires screeched against the wet pavement as he pulled away from the curb. Hold on, he said, gripping the wheel. We're getting out of here. Mia glanced behind them, panic rising. He's following us. Ethan checked the rearview mirror. The man had gotten into a silver Subaru and was turning onto the street behind them. Don't worry, Ethan said, trying to sound calmer than he felt. We're faster. They raced through the busy Seattle morning, weaving between cars, turning down side streets. When Ethan finally slowed, the Subaru was nowhere in sight. Mia sagged in her seat, shaking with silent tears. Ethan, I'm so sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to pull you into this. You didn't pull me in, he said firmly. I chose to help you. Mia looked at him, and for the first time, trust flickered in her eyes. But that trust shattered a second later when Ethan's phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. He opened it. His blood ran cold. Bring her to the wedding, or I'll find you both. Ethan thought helping Mia would complicate his week. He never imagined it would drag him into a threat tied directly to his ex-fiancée's wedding. Ethan stared at the message on his phone, the words burning into his mind. Bring her to the wedding, or I'll find you both. His fingers tightened around the phone until his knuckles went white. Mia noticed his expression shift and leaned in. What does it say? She whispered, voice trembling. Ethan hesitated. Part of him wanted to protect her, keep her from panic. But Mia had been living in survival mode for too long. She deserved the truth. He handed her the phone. She read the message once, then again. Her breaths grew shallow. No. No, no, no. This can't be happening. Ethan placed a steady hand on her arm. Mia, listen to me. How does he know about the wedding? She choked out. How does he know you? I've never even seen him talk to anyone but… She cut herself off as if she'd said too much. Ethan leaned closer. But who, Mia? She shook her head violently. I don't know how he knew. I swear I don't. But something about the way she looked out the window, like she was searching for an answer she was afraid to say, made Ethan's stomach twist. He took a deep breath. Mia, we need to be smart. Whoever this guy is, he's not acting alone. If he wants you at that wedding… Ethan swallowed. Then someone there wants to see you. Mia wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to become smaller. I shouldn't have come with you, she whispered. I shouldn't have offered to go to that wedding. I'm putting you in danger. Mia, stop. Ethan's voice grew firmer. You didn't cause this. Someone is targeting you. And now they're trying to use me to get to you. She covered her face with her hands. I don't understand why. Tyler's gone. I have nothing. Why won't they leave me alone? Ethan didn't have an answer. He wished he did. Where can we go? Mia finally asked, desperate. Do you have somewhere safe? Somewhere he can't follow. Ethan nodded, thinking fast. My condo in downtown Seattle has 24-hour security. Cameras. Underground parking. No one gets in without clearance. Mia hesitated. Are you sure? Yes, he said without wavering. You'll be protected there. She slowly nodded, trusting him. Ethan took a sharp turn toward I-5, merging onto the highway. The skyscrapers of downtown grew larger as they approached. Traffic blurred around them. Mia kept glancing at every passing car like she expected that Subaru to reappear, but it didn't, for now. When they reached the secure parking entrance beneath Ethan's high-rise building, the guard recognized his car and lifted the gate. Ethan parked in his reserved space, then helped Mia out. She clutched her backpack tightly, staying close as they entered the private elevator. Inside the quiet elevator, Mia's voice broke the silence. "Ethan, why are you risking all this for me?" He met her eyes, because something about her made him care, more deeply than he expected. Before he could answer, the elevator dinged. They stepped out into Ethan's elegant 28th floor hallway, but sitting on the floor next to his condo door was a single white envelope. Mia froze. Ethan's heart hammered. He already knew, before touching it, that it wasn't from management, security, or a neighbor. He picked it up. Inside was a printed photo of him and Mia, taken at the diner, the exact booth they had been sitting in, and written across the photo in red ink: "Don't be late for the wedding." Anyone could send a text. Anyone could pretend to know something. But a photo taken without their knowledge, delivered to Ethan's private condo floor, meant one thing: they were already inside his life. Ethan stared at the photo, his pulse pounding in his ears. The angle of the shot was wrong. Too close, too clear. It wasn't taken from outside the diner. It wasn't taken secretly through a window. It was taken inside. Someone had been sitting close enough to hear them, watch them, study them. Mia covered her mouth, her body shaking. How did they? "Ethan, your building has security. Cameras. Guards." "I know," he said, jaw tight. "Which is why this shouldn't be possible." He scanned the hallway. Everything looked normal: modern gray carpeting, minimalist lighting, polished walls. But now it felt threatening. "Too quiet," Mia whispered. "What if he followed us in?" He couldn't have. The gate logs every plate number and alerts security if something's off. Ethan turned the envelope over. No markings.
No fingerprints visible.
This person didn't break in. Mia looked up at him, terrified. Then how did they get here? Ethan met her eyes. They were already inside the building. Mia went pale. He unlocked his condo, pushed the door open slowly, and flicked on the lights. The place looked exactly as he left it. High ceilings, sleek furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. No sign of a break-in, no tracks, nothing moved, but something felt wrong. Ethan stepped inside first, checking each room quickly. The kitchen, the office, the spare room, even the balcony. Mia waited nervously by the door, gripping her backpack so tightly her knuckles turned white. "It's clear," Ethan said. She exhaled shakily and entered. Ethan locked the door behind them and slid the security bar into place. Mia sat on the edge of the couch, her hands trembling uncontrollably. "Ethan, this man killed Tyler. If he finds me, he won't," Ethan said. "Not here." But he wasn't as confident as he sounded. He grabbed his phone and called the front desk. "Hey, Mark, it's Ethan Hale. Has anyone been on the 28th floor this morning?" The security guard checked. Ethan heard the keyboard clicking through the phone. Finally. "Only you, Mr. Hale." Ethan swallowed hard. "No deliveries? No maintenance? No guests signed in?" "No, sir." "All right. Thanks." He hung up. Mia closed her eyes. So the envelope just appeared? "Someone knows how to bypass systems," Ethan murmured. "Someone who knew we were coming here." Silence settled heavily between them. Finally, Mia whispered, "Ethan, maybe I should leave." "No," his voice was sharp, desperate even. "You're safer with me than out there alone. But you don't understand. Then help me understand." She fell quiet, then slowly, hesitantly, she opened her backpack. Inside were old papers, faded receipts, and one small lockbox. She set the lockbox on the coffee table. "This," Mia whispered, "is why they want me." Ethan stared at it. "What's inside?" "My fiancé left it for me. I didn't even know it existed until after his death. I've never opened it because," her voice cracked, "because I'm scared of what's in it. And because the people who killed him, they're looking for this." Ethan leaned closer. "Mia, does it have proof of the drug ring?" She nodded weakly. "I think so." Ethan inhaled sharply. Everything suddenly made sense. The threats, the stalking, the wedding demand. But before he could open the lockbox, Mia whispered something that froze him. "Ethan, the man in the hoodie isn't the only one involved." Ethan looked at her sharply. "Who else?" Mia's eyes filled with terror. Your ex-fiancée, Charlotte, she's connected to all of this. The night felt heavier than usual, as if the air itself was warning her. After hours of staring at the screen, the girl finally closed her laptop, but the moment she did, her phone buzzed, unknown number. You shouldn't have looked that deep. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She hadn't told anyone what she found on the dark web. Those hidden files, the list of missing girls, and the one name that matched someone she once knew. She blocked the number immediately, but another message came, then another, and another, each from a different number, each saying the same thing. We see you. You're next. Stop searching or disappear. Her hand shook as she tossed her phone away, but just then, the lights in her room flickered, once, twice, then went completely out. A coldness spread over her skin. Not a normal chill, a presence, something watching Daya in the darkness. Her laptop screen turned on by itself. A single window opened. N-O buttons, N-O interface. Just a live video feed. A grainy, black and white view of her bedroom window from outside. Someone was already standing there, motionless, hooded, watching her. And then a distorted voice crackled through her laptop speakers. Her breath trembled as she stared at the frozen video feed. The hooded figure outside her window didn't move, not even a sway. Just a silhouette carved out of the darkness. Her instinct screamed run, but something stronger held her in place. Curiosity, or maybe fate. Slowly, she stepped toward the window. The voice from her laptop repeated, softer this time, almost coaxing, "Open the curtains." Her fingers hovered just inches from the fabric. The room was so silent she could hear her own pulse thundering in her ears. Before she could decide, her phone buzzed violently on the floor. A new message from another unknown number. Do not open it. He's not alone. Her lungs froze. Another message followed instantly. Check the hallway. Her throat tightened. She turned slowly toward her bedroom door. The hallway light was already on, but she hadn't turned it on. The shadow of someone's legs stretched across the bottom of her door, not moving, not shifting, just waiting. Point 2 threats, point 1 outside, point 1 inside. Her laptop chimed again, pulling her attention back to the screen. The hooded figure finally moved, lifting a hand and tracing a slow circle on her window, as if marking her. The hallway figure took a single step. Floorboards creaked. She was trapped between two unknown dangers. Her heart pounded so hard, she thought it might explode as she backed up to the center of the room. Then, her phone buzzed again. You have one choice left. Choose who you face. Whoever was texting her, they knew everything. They were guiding her to or manipulating her. Either way, she stood frozen in the middle of her bedroom. One thread at the window, another in the hallway, and a phone buzzing in her trembling hand. Choose who you face. The message echoed in her mind like a countdown. She forced herself to breathe. Whoever was in the hallway was already inside. That alone made her decision. She grabbed the metal lamp from her nightstand, tightened her grip, and stepped toward the door. Her hand shook as she twisted the knob and yanked it open, but there was no one, just the empty hallway, and then a shadow moved behind her. She spun around, lamp raised, only to see a uniformed officer standing in her bedroom doorway, hands lifted in caution. Ma'am, easy. I'm Officer Hale. We got an emergency ping from your phone. Are you safe? Safe. She felt the weight of the last hour crash into her all at once. Someone was outside, someone was inside. We know. The officer slowly lowered his hands. You've been targeted. Her blood ran cold. He stepped into the room and glanced at her laptop, where the frozen image of the hooded figure remained on screen. That man outside? Hale said quietly. We've been tracking him for weeks. He's been using hacked smart devices to surveillance women living alone. Her breath hitched. Then who texted me? Who told me not to open the curtains? The officer hesitated. That's the reason we got here so fast, he said. Someone anonymous sent us your address along with a live screen recording from your device. Whoever they are, they helped you. But they didn't stick around. Her phone buzzed one last time to a final message. You're safe now. But never ignore your instincts again. I'll be watching, just not the way he was. Before she could reply, the number disconnected. Permanently. Outside, Backup officers swarmed the yard and arrested the hooded figure. Another unit found pry marks on her back door, proof she hadn't imagined the second intruder. The reality sank in like ice. She had been a target, a statistic in the making. But someone unknown, not a villain this time, had intervened. Days later, she moved out of that apartment and installed every security measure available. Therapy helped her untangle the lingering fear. Sleep eventually came back, but one consequence stayed with her. She never ignored a strange noise again, never brushed off intuition, never slipped into complacency, because the world had shown her, brutally and clearly, that danger didn't always knock. Sometimes it waited in the hallway, sometimes it stood under the streetlight, and sometimes, just sometimes, a stranger watching in the dark wasn't the threat. But the only reason she survived the end.